Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Board of County Commissioners agenda setting and work session for September 22nd, 2020. If you'd like to join in via conference call, the number is 360-252-9020 and your PIN number is 1234. I am John Hutchings, the chair of the board. We also have Vice Chair Commissioner Ty Menser. Is Commissioner Edwards in the house?
No, sir. He's just walking in.
Okay. And we have the county manager, Ramiro Chavez. And I see the treasurer, county treasurer, Jeff Gabman is here. And Thurston County Health Officer, Dr. Dimiana Abdamalik. And our housing coordinator, Keely Marino. And I introduce people I've missed that I don't see. Ramiro, would you please? I don't see them on the screen.
I have Teresa Parsons, Kurt Harding, Kerry Hibdon, Lucy Mills, Thomasina Cooper, Tim Wilson, Chris Hawkins, and wow. Katie Johnson. And Shelley just joined us.
Yes, Director of Public Health and Social Services. So with that, thank you very much for joining in. The first thing we'll start with is the COVID-19 update. And I'll turn to Shelley Slaughter.
Good morning, commissioners.
Good morning.
In Washington State, as of Sunday, there were 82,548 cases of COVID-19, 2,037 deaths. Here in Thurston County, we've had 1,140 confirmed cases of COVID-19, and in the last week, 41 new cases. There's been 17 deaths to date, and unfortunately one in the last week since we gave this report. 81 people have been hospitalized since this pandemic began in Thurston County, and we've had 2 new hospitalizations in the last week, with a total of 14 COVID positive cases in our local hospitals, because that includes other counties. 939 people have been released from public health supervision, and we're happy to report that our positivity rate is 1.9%, which is below our target. We've had 10 outbreaks since this outbreak began, with 1 occurring in the last week, and we are still currently investigating 2 outbreaks. In terms of our case rate, according to the Governor's Risk Assessment Board as of Sunday, which is the latest reported data, our case rate is 30.8 per 100,000 people over the last 2 weeks. Our hospital capacity is stable right now, with 78% of total licensed beds occupied, and 2.3% occupied by those COVID patients, those 14 COVID patients. We're working closely with the hospitals to plan for surge capacity in the event that we need it in the fall, and closely monitoring our flu illness as well. And with that, I will pass it to Dr. Abdamalik to provide some more information.
Thank you.
Good morning, commissioners.
Good morning.
Good morning. When we last spoke a week ago, I spoke about whether we might be concerned about a spike in cases from Labor Day weekend, and we have not seen that in our data. So there hasn't been, we haven't seen a significant increase in our case rate, and we're at the 2-week mark from when Labor Day weekend ended. So that's a very good sign. We're continuing to look at what our likely COVID-19 trajectory is going into fall, and are reviewing the safety of openings of recommending opening schools for some in-person learning, and would anticipate making a statement in the next few days on that matter. The other matter that I wanted to address with all of you is there was some CDC guidance that was released briefly over the weekend that stated that COVID-19 was transmitted both through droplets and aerosols, which are smaller particles. I wanted to reassure everyone, because this is a novel virus, and as we learn more, I do anticipate the guidance and to change. So our state, in its guidance, in our guidance at the county level, has accounted for the fact that that there are certain ways that COVID-19 is more easily transmitted. So we have increased guidance around fitness centers because exertion and heavy breathing can sometimes cause the droplets to migrate a little bit further. It's also part of why we as a state have some restrictions on live entertainment, such as singing, which also carries a risk. What this guidance really shows all of us is that distance alone is not sufficient to prevent COVID-19 spread. We do need to also include face coverings as well. Face coverings keep droplets close to the face and absorb them. There has been a lot of evidence that face coverings decrease transmission rates in states and cities that have adopted them. And there's also some case-based evidence that masking is significantly protective. So thinking about the famous case in Missouri with the two individuals who were cutting hair, saw tens and tens of people were wearing masks and did not manage to transmit. So while we're still learning exactly how COVID-19 spreads, the mitigation factors that we have in place as a state and as a county are based on the best available evidence, and a combination of distancing and masking and avoiding high risk activities as per the guidance that we have is a good way to stop the spread of COVID-19. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, I would think, Doc, we said the 2-week incubation period passing since Labor Day, many folks will be anxiously waiting to hear what you have to say about schools. I turn to my commissioners. Commissioner Edwards, anything?
No, you mentioned schools, and that's the biggest question I get is when we might have additional information on schools.
So we'll definitely have additional information within the next couple of days.
Okay.
Commissioner Menser?
Going back to Shelley's numbers, 30.8 per 100,000. And I remember at one point, I think it was phase 2 to phase 3 or something, at one point we needed a target of 24, I want to say, per 100,000 over 2 weeks. So what is the significance of that number, 24? Is that tied to contact tracing capacity, or why was that an important benchmark? And it seems like we're close, but a little over.
That was a requirement for us to advance into phase 3. So that's where we were at right before going into phase 3. And since that time, that has been our target. We exceeded that case rate, and we've been trying to get back down. So I mentioned that today because that's a significant benchmark, and it's good news that we're getting closer to meeting that target again.
But do you know why that target is important, that particular number? Is it just kind of that's a good number that's easy to contain or easy to? I mean, is there some meaning to that number, or is it just kind of considered a low case rate, just generally? There's some scientific reason why 24 out of 100,000 is a good number for the state. Maybe you don't know. I'm just asking.
Yes. So I may have Dr. Abdulmalik chime in on this, but those were the benchmarks that were set by the state of Washington, by the governor, in concert with health officers and epidemiologists and other experts as we looked at case rates of this virus around the world, and saw where for the population, what kind of level of risk was needed to keep community transmission low enough to keep the spread from growing beyond an R naught of 1. Also, that was another metric that we looked at. But as for exactly why it was 25 per 100,000, you know,
trying to figure out how excited
there's a
I
lot
need
of
to
people
get.
that weighed in on that one. So, and
We're
that's
getting closer and closer.
those, and the metrics that we're looking at to determine risk, you will notice, and members of the public will notice that that has varied and changed according to different guidance, and that's something that we all continue to take a look at. Dr. A, would you add anything to that?
No, I think you got all of the points. Thanks.
One other question for Dr. A, the droplets and aerosols. I didn't look at the CDC change or whatever, but I thought we already knew that droplets and aerosols were transmissible. I mean, why is this news? I thought we already were aware of that potential transmission through both of those ways.
I know that the health community has been aware of that, as well as the CDC. What my understanding of what the concern was what that would mean. It's more of a when a disease is transmitted by smaller particles that have the potential to spread further, that means that that distance alone isn't enough to fully mitigate spread. And I think that piece of it might have been a little bit different than the way some people had conceived of the virus. The other piece of it is smaller droplets can stay in the air a little bit longer. So how long is a space at risk? And so I think that with that wording change, it was a change in. It also speaks to a potential change in how people think about the disease and the risk of various activities. But it doesn't actually represent a change in functionally what we need to do or what our guidance is and has been as a state and as a county. Because as a state and as a county, we're looking at our data and we're looking at how people are actually getting the disease as it spreads, whether it's, you know, droplets with some aerosolization. And so when we kind of really focus on you know, keeping people outdoors instead of indoors, where it's less likely to have small droplets hanging out in the air, all of that guidance that we've been giving is completely in keeping with what the CDC released and then is currently adapting.
It usually takes the federal government a little while to catch up to Thurston County, so this is
Well, I thought the same thing. I thought that's not news. We already know that. So I was thinking that it had more to do with, and I might be wrong, but I was just trying to figure it out, that with the smaller, finer droplets, it was more about what is the mask covering, not protecting or not preventing from escaping. And I thought I was likening it to more of the mask issue rather than, but we're just learning that it spreads through the air.
And also ventilation, the importance of ventilation is the other piece that really comes out when we think about this.
Okay. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Shelley. Anything else, commissioners? Or Romero? Nope.
No, thank you.
All right. We're moving on to homeless strategies with our very own Keely Marino.
Good morning. Keely
Morning.
Marino with Public Health and Social Services. Just a brief update for you today. I wanted to give you another Eviction, Prevention, and Rental Assistance Program update. At this point, the Community Action Council has served 158 households. They've paid 335 future months worth of rent and 139 of back rent, months of back rent, and have spent out a total of $473, $293, or $474 or so. 1,000.
1,000. Yeah, that's the key, 1,000.
There's so many numbers on my page, I got lost. Okay. And we're meeting our targets as set out by the Department of Commerce, which is to ensure that we're reaching out to underserved and disproportionately represented communities that are experiencing or are at risk for eviction. Last week also was poor air quality, and we were in the middle of a hazardous weather event as declared by Director Shelley Slaughter and Public Health Officer Dr. Abdulmalik. And on Tuesday of last week, I spoke with Dr. Abdulmalik, and Dr. Abdulmalik determined that we should extend it for a few more days until Thursday. And so we were able to extend both shelter nights as well as daytime clean air operations at the Olympia Center. So Interfaith Works and First Christian Church continue to offer extra shelter beds. They could go up to 15 beds, and in the last 3 nights of their shelter operations, they were able to serve 8 additional individuals in their shelter. So we are grateful for them, as always. Last week, the Regional Housing Council also met. We're getting very close to having a finalized and completely signed interlocal agreement, which will make our Regional Housing Council ready to go and do the work that it's set out to do. So excited to get that going, to be a part of that. And then finally, the Department of Enterprise Services are continuing officially their rulemaking process around parking restrictions, or how they're going to handle parking along Deschutes Parkway in particular. And I have been invited to sit on their sounding board meeting, which is one of the few that they will be having in the upcoming weeks in order to work on their rule that they are drafting currently. And they will be presenting their draft rule to the Housing Action Team in October. And that's my update.
Wow. Commissioner Menser, any questions for Keely?
One question, one comment. Comment is just thank you again to First Christian Church for stepping up as usual. They can't be thanked enough for what they do on difficult situations. And then that last piece about the DES and the RV parking rule and stuff. So you're going to be on a sounding board. What are you going to sound? What are you going to sound off? What's the answer, Keely?
Oh my goodness. Can I show you my Han Solo photo? No.
Don't give it away.
To listen, and I'm going to offer whatever operates in the best interest of our county, and also hopefully doesn't just kick the can down the road. And I know that is also the intent of the Department of Enterprise Services. They don't want to do that. They want to have a solution. So.
Thank you.
Commissioner Edwards?
No, sir. I'm good. Thank you.
Keely, I would like to use the word currently when we're talking about the Community Action Council, what they're doing. You said 158 served. And I think it was a different number for past rent paid up and then paid through the next several months through the end of the year.
Correct.
For those folks that are facing the threat of eviction currently,
Correct.
Because I might be wrong, but not 100% of the folks, but many of them were probably under the threat of eviction regardless. This has really given them a saving grace where it's one less thing to worry about, but perhaps an opportunity to use this time to save some money. But as soon as the money runs and the virus runs, I think they're going to be in the same boat again, facing the threat of eviction. So it's a huge current temporary fix, and it just points to the long-term solution needed for rent assistance, rent control, whatever the solution is. I'm not trying to pick on one individual or industry, but it's a huge, massive problem. But it's nice to hear that that those folks are saved, but just currently. I don't want people to lose sight of that. So thank you very much.
My pleasure.
We're now going to review the Board of County Commissioners draft agenda for this afternoon, September 22nd. And we will call the meeting to order at 2 o'clock with the Pledge of Allegiance to be led by Commissioner Gary Edwards, and then approval of the agenda and the board meeting minutes from last week. Is there any change to the agenda at this point? No? Okay. We're going to get into presentations then, and there's a proclamation for National Voter Registration Day.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioners. You did not have the opportunity to review this item last week. This is a new item submitted by the Auditor Mary Hall. And it just happens that today is National Voters Day. And the auditors would like for you to consider signing a proclamation celebrating September 22nd, 2020 as National Voter Registration Day in Thurston County. In your packet is a copy of the proclamation. I know you have not got a chance to review it, but if you have any comments before this afternoon, we certainly can implement those changes.
All right, I'm reviewing it now for the first time, as you said. Do my seatmates have any questions or comments regarding this proclamation?
No.
Commissioner Edwards, anything?
No, sir.
No, it looks good. It looks good to me. Thank you, Romero. Then we have the opportunity for the public to address the board.
Yeah, you may receive additional public testimony related to the Black Lake Special Use District. And I am planning to address some of the comments you received last week. And maybe I can go in more detail of that later today on that agenda when you have the item of public testimony.
Okay. And then the county manager's update, agenda item number 2.
Yeah, I will follow up on the
follow up.
Black Lake Special Use District comments.
That takes us to agenda item number 3, the consent items A through G, and 3A is the treasurer, and it's the tax title property. And I think we have, there he is, Treasurer Jeff Gadman on board.
You want me to frame that, Jeff?
Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, you reviewed this item last week. This is a proposal for you for the county treasurer to go ahead and go through a tax foreclosure action for a property located within the boundaries of the city of Tenino. This is a 0.53 acres, and the proposed action price is $12,263.50, which includes fees, associated fees. I give you some perspective, the potential impact to bring this property into the tax roll will represent about $55.10 to the general fund. Any questions on that?
I don't. Do my seatmates have questions on that?
I don't know.
3, B, and C are the same thing, tax title properties that we covered last week.
Yeah, the same. It's a little bit different properties. This is the 3B. This is a vacation, tax title property that has related to a neighborhood, and it was intended to be a trail. There is an opportunity perhaps to surplus this property to the underlying property owners. And this is located along the Wattle Creek Road in Southeast County. This encompasses a 1.43 acres. It has deemed unbuildable, and the proposed sale price will be $2,588.50, which includes all the fees. The approximate property tax that will come back to the general fund, it will be about $12.79.
Okay. You want to cover 3C as well?
Yes, and the next property is located in the same neighborhood along the Waddell Creek Road. This is a parcel that is about 0.20 acres. And the proposed sale price is $2,962.50, which includes all the fees and taxes. The approximate general fund property tax contribution when this property becomes part of the tax roll will be about $65.94.
All right.
And Mr. Gaffin is here to answer any questions.
Treasurer Gavin, do you have anything to add to this?
I just want to add that items B and C there are actually, we want to send these properties to public auction because we believe that there will be multiple interest in them.
Okay, but not A.
So the figures that Ramiro gave would be the minimum bid at auction.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Do my seatmates have any questions?
No, sir.
No? Okay, nor do I. Thank you, Jeff, very much.
But
Thank you all.
I also like to take the opportunity to give kudos to the county treasurer because he has been diligent in taking all the tax title properties and go through the process to make sure they go back to the tax roll. So kudos to you, Mr. Treasurer.
Yep,
Thank
good
you
job.
very much. You know, I got to be honest, we will never get the list down to 0 properties because there are some properties that nobody's going to ever have an interest in owning, but we're going to get it knocked down as much as we can over the next few years.
Well, the citizens are getting their nickels worth out of you.
I hope so.
Yeah, so thank you. All right, 3D is the sheriff decreasing the change fund.
Yeah, you reviewed this item last week, and for your consideration, commissioners, is for you to approve a resolution to decrease the sheriff's office change fund by $400. That will go from $800 to $400. The reason for this request is the transactions the sheriff's office have been conducting has been increasing being online. So there is no need to have that much cash on that particular fund.
Right, any questions, commissioners?
No, sir.
Nope, okay. 3E is the sheriff's office decreasing petty cash fund.
Yeah, this is another request from the sheriff's office, as you stated, and this is for you to consider decreasing the sheriff's office petty cash fund by $100. That will go from $200 to $100.
Okay,
And the
questions?
same reason as to they have increased the transactions using credit cards.
Okay, commissioners, any questions?
No.
Okay. 3F, juvenile court probation petty cash account.
Yeah, in this case, the juvenile court is requesting for you to abolish the juvenile probation petty cash account. And the same reasons, there is not a need to have cash at hand anymore, since most of the transactions are going through a credit card base.
Okay, anything on that, gentlemen? Nope. All right, and 3G is the auditors, the financial services, the voucher list. And if you haven't had your questions answered, you can go ahead and get them answered now or before the meeting. But I'm presuming we've all three of us have read the voucher list. Moving into department items, agenda item number 4 is the commissioners, the county manager authorizing the coronavirus relief fund contract.
Yeah, commissioners, you did not review this item. This is a brand new item for your consideration today. And this is related to the additional CRF, the Coronavirus Relief Fund, the county received from the Department of Commerce in the order of $5,718,000. On a couple of weeks ago, you had a planning session in which you made some decisions as to how you like to distribute that. Later today, we revisit some of those decisions, and perhaps additional decisions needed to be made. So this particular item is for you to authorize the county manager to go ahead and sign the supplemental agreement with the Department of Commerce to receive the additional $5,718,000 of coronavirus relief fund. Also, in this agreement extends the deadline. The previous deadline for expenditure was October 31st, 2020. With the supplement agreement, extends the expenditure to November 30, 2020. And that extension includes all the funds that we received, including the $15.7 million initial allocation that we received a couple of months ago.
Is that what this is in our packet then, Ramiro?
I don't know where you're showing me.
Additional COVID relief funds. Continued discussion from September 11th. Planning session?
That's an item later today on your agenda.
Okay. All right. Put that back. All right. Any questions on item number 4, commissioners?
No, sir.
No, okay. Agenda item number 5, the CPED, setting a public hearing.
This is also a new item for this afternoon, and this is related to a developers agreement. The staff gave you a briefing last week, and this is associated with the Sienna 2. You took an action to extend the permits to January 1st, 2021 for this particular development. The developer has faced, obviously, as many others, delays on implementing the construction of this particular proposal. It has requested to extend that to August 1st, 2021. Staff provided a briefing on July 30, 2009. I'm sorry, this year. No, it was in August. I'm sorry. To the board, and the board agreed that perhaps setting a public hearing will be the next step. Brett Burris is here to answer any questions related to this particular request. And again, it's extending the developers agreement deadline from January 1st, 2021 to August 1st, 2021.
Brett, do you have anything to add? Oh, you're frozen in time. Okay, let me ask the commissioners, do you have any questions of Romero or Brett if he comes back?
No, sir.
Or if he thaws out? Okay. I remember this, discussing this. Any questions, Ty?
No, Ramiro says it's a new item, but I know we had a discussion at some point. 'Cause I
No, the
remember
new item on the agenda because it was not part of your review agenda of last week. That's what I meant.
Okay, well, at some point we did discuss it, I remember.
Yeah, you did, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Brett. Brett, brilliant job. Thank you very much. As usual.
A difficulty.
Did you have anything to add at all to that?
No, sir.
Okay. Then we're moving on. Thank you, sir. Agenda item number 6A, Public Health and Social Services, approving a Medicaid transformation 4-year funding alliance with Cascade.
Yeah, Commissioners, you review this item, and this is a proposal for you to consider extending the Cascade Pacific Alliance contract that goes through January 31st, 2022. In July 2018, Thurston County, the Public Health Social Services submitted a response for a request for proposals in the Medicaid Transformation Project, which is overseen by the Cascade Pacific Action Alliance, also known as CPAA. Excuse me. The regional efforts mean to address a triple aim for improving health and healthcare on 7 counties in Southwest Washington. The 3 key elements is improve health outcomes, improve healthcare quality, and reduce healthcare costs. The county was awarded $137,775 as a result of the request for proposal response. And this particular item is to extend the contract that allows to continue to provide the services with the same dollar amount that has been added to that, awarded to this contract. Chris Hawkins is here. I believe you had some questions for him, and he also is available to answer additional questions you may have.
Chris, before we get into questions, do you have anything you'd like to add?
County Manager Ramiro Chavez has covered it well. I don't have a lot more to say about this. I think I addressed the question last week. It was about what are the specific activities, and there are 3 main project areas that we're working on for this Medicaid transformation project. I'm happy to answer further questions you have about that and any other information that you need.
Okay, Commissioner Edwards, anything for
No,
Chris?
sir.
Commissioner Menser?
No.
No, nor do I. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you very much, folks.
Agenda item number 7 is Public Works, Ordinance establishing complete streets policy.
This is an item you have reviewed on a couple of occasions, Commissioners. And on February 12, 2020, the Public Works briefed the board on the proposed complete street ordinance in conjunction with finalizing the Main Street Rochester plan. So this is the last step in the process for you to consider adopting an ordinance to establish the complete streets. By doing so, it will allow to access additional funding by the Transportation Improvement Board. They actually specifically addresses the completed streets grant program. Also allows the county engineer to go ahead and change the road standards to align with the complete streets policies. I believe Teresa Parsons is here if you have additional questions related to this item.
All right. Good morning, Teresa. Do you have anything you'd like to add before we jump into questions?
No, I think Romero did a good job.
All right. Commissioner Menser, anything?
No?
Commissioner Edwards?
No, sir, we've covered this for quite a while. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you.
That one's done. Then we get into the administrative or administrivia at the end. We'll talk about our reports on board work sessions and committees and our calendar. And that takes care of today's agenda, this afternoon's agenda for the 22nd. We're going to now move into previewing the agenda for next Tuesday, September 29th, 2020. The meeting will be called to order at 2 o'clock and the Pledge of Allegiance led by Vice Chair Commissioner Menser, and approval of the agenda and board meeting minutes from today. And the presentation that we start with next week is on Thurston County Flood Awareness Week.
Yeah, Commissioners, this is a yearly event for you to consider, and there's a proclamation to declare October 12th as the Thurston County Flood Awareness Week. Kurt Harding is here, I believe. He can walk you through as to the intent of this. And again, this is in preparation for the upcoming flood and potential flood season as we near the fall and winter months.
Okay.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Director of Emergency Services. It's appropriate that we talk about Flood Awareness Week today because today's the first day of autumn or fall. Summer ended yesterday, and the sun just didn't get the memo because the sun will be gone by tonight, and you won't see it for about a week. So our first storm system is coming in tonight. And so what we want to do here is for Flood Awareness Week, the emphasis is on activities and preparedness that people in Thurston County can utilize to get ready for the winter season. Activities that we're using, including using TC Media Zoom presentations for flood messaging. We have designated we're asking you to designate the week of October 12th as Flood Awareness Week. We're going to do a TC Alert, Thurston Community Alert test to those people who are signed up for river alerts. And then we mailed out a flood bulletin in September to everyone who lives in designated flood zones and are subject also to groundwater flooding. And then we'll also be doing virtual Map Your Neighborhood trainings within the county. And then all during the month, we're messaging everyone to remind them of winter weather preparedness and flood insurance. And then on October 15th, while this isn't flood related, we're doing also the Great Shakeout. So October 15th at 10:15 a.m., we do the Great Shakeout. Not only is in Thurston County and Washington State, but it's an international event as well now. And so it's designed to have people drop, cover, and hold in the event that the ground starts shaking. One of the areas that we're going to emphasize as well is financial mitigation. People who get flood insurance, if their home or is flooded out or they get flood waters or damage, they can utilize that flood insurance to help recover, because I will tell you that people typically think their homeowner's insurance covers flood damage, but it doesn't. So we're going to be also emphasizing financial mitigation through flood insurance and through the National Flood Insurance Program. And so what I'm going to do now is I am going to attempt to try to share my screen so that the people who are tuned in can see the contact information for Thurston County Emergency Management. And hopefully you can see that now. And that's the website, and that's our phone number. If people have additional questions or want to talk about or ask about how they can be more prepared, there's the information right there.
leave it up while we ask any questions, Kurt, please.
Will do.
Commissioner Menser, anything for Kurt regarding the proclamation?
No, it looks good. Thanks, Kurt.
Okay. Commissioner Edwards?
No, sir.
Great. And this is on the website. And what other ways you're getting it out? Social media?
Correct. We're using social media. We're using TC media. We're using a lot of different approaches to try to get the word out.
Good. Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That takes care of the proclamation then. And then there's going to be the opportunity. Oh, I'm sorry, Kurt. Thank you very much. The opportunity for the public to address the board, and it's a bit premature. County manager's update, similar. And then agenda item number 3. At this point, we only have one consent item. That's A, and that's the voucher list for the week, and we will receive that this week. And that takes us to agenda item number 4, CPED, Community Planning and Economic Development. And the first is setting a public hearing for open space tax program applications.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioners. Last week, you received a briefing from staff related to the annual open space program. As a matter of background, the county manages 2 different open space. One is managed by the assessor's office, which focuses on farm and agricultural open space. And the other one is managed by the Office of the Board of County Commissioners. There were 2 applications. They no longer meet the requirements of the assessor's open space. And as a result, they have the opportunity to apply for the Commissioner's open space program. And those applications were submitted. They have been ranked. And also they submitted 2 other applications outside of that particular path, which is includes the forest and open space program for the county. You reviewed those 4 applications last week. As a matter of background, the Planning Commission held a public hearing on August 19, 2020. And as a result of that public hearing, they have made recommendations for the Board of County Commissioners to approve the applications. Before the board can approve those applications, you need to hold a public hearing. In this particular item, is requesting for you to consider setting the public hearing for October 20th, 2020 at 3 in the afternoon. I believe Christina Chappelle is here to answer any questions that you may have.
All right. Anything to add, Chris?
Nope, nothing to add.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions regarding this?
Not about setting the hearing, good.
Okay, Gary, nothing?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Agenda item number 5, Public Works, setting a public hearing regarding open space. Bart?
Thank you, Commissioners. This is an item that you received a couple of briefings, one on June 10, 2020, and one on July 15, 2020 by Public Works. Well, the Public Works walk you through the draft park, open space, and trails, also known as the POST plan. And without getting into too much detail of what the plan includes a little bit of the outlook as to how recreation in parks and trails will be managed in the future. As you may recall, there was a good conversation related to the level of service included in this plan. As a result of those briefings, you directed the staff to submit an AIS to set a public hearing for the public to provide the opportunity to give you their feedback. And this particular item sets the public hearing for October 27, 2020 at 3 in the afternoon in this room. And I believe Lucy Mills, or Kerry Hibdon. Lucy Mills is here to answer any questions you may have. Are you there, Lucy?
Meeting.
Yes, I'm here. Carrie's also here to answer questions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Edwards, any questions
No,
for
sir.
Lucy or Carrie? Okay. Commissioner Menser? No, nor do I.
So I do have a comment, and I'm gonna just steal the thunder, but I believe Last year, you may recall that Kerry Hibdon was planning to retire, and he was kind enough to stay for another year. And he has submitted his formal retirement notice, I believe, by the end of October. And so it's going to be some time to say thank you to Kerry for the many years he has contributed to the parks and trails in Thurston County. But also I'd like to give this little opportunity to say thank you for everything what you have done, Kerry. You have been an outstanding public employee, and the citizens of the county have benefited from your commitment to parks and trails here in Thurston County.
Wow. Well, is Kerry on the?
I am. Thank you, Ramiro. I appreciate that very much. It's been an honor.
Well, I tell you what, you received his application for retirement, the paperwork for retirement. You're going to tear that one up too?
Yeah.
I hope. Even all the community members that I deal with over the last 3 years sing of your praises, Kerry, and you've been nothing but positive and can do, and let's work through this attitude has been phenomenal, and it's been very rewarding and makes me very happy. Thank you, sir. It's a joy knowing you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate that very much.
All right. Anything else, commissioners?
Yes, Hutch?
Yeah, go ahead.
I have to say, any chance that we could get Kerry to reconsider? Would there be anything that we could do to get you to reconsider?
I think at this point, I'm looking forward to seeing what other challenges life has for me and pursuing those. I appreciate it very much. And again, I would say that the honor, and it's truly been an honor to be responsible for taking care of county property, open spaces, and recreational activities for the citizens and the visitors to Thurston County for over 30 years. The thanks all come from me. I appreciate your thanks, and I reciprocate and say they come from me.
You know, what's funny is I've known Kerry now for 4 years, but we have lived within spitting distance of each other for about the last 15, 20 years. And we never knew that until about a year or two ago.
That's right.
So I look forward to seeing you once in a while in the neighborhood, and I haven't seen you yet. So I look for you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Best to you. We'll talk before you exit. We'll talk more.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Gary. That was 5A. Now 5B is an ordinance regarding the role of special assessment for Black Lake Special District.
Yeah, I believe, Commissioners, you're well familiar with this request. The Black Lake Special Use District requested the Board of County Commissioners to authorize a proposed assessment generating $103,000 a year, with the intent to provide some treatment to Black Lake in terms of water quality. This special assessment includes 179 lakefront properties that have been determined by the Black Lake Special Use District. They will receive the benefits of those improvements. The assessment varies from $32 to $17,736. That will be the Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife. However, the median cost of affected properties will be about $575.42 a year. According to RCW 85-38-160, the Board of County Commissioners need to hold a public hearing before you can consider a final action on this. And that public hearing was held on July 28th, 2020. And staff follow up with a couple of briefings with the board. And here we are is with the proposed ordinance for you to consider taking an action on this. Tim Wilson is here to answer any questions. And as you know, this has been the source of a lot of public testimony, as well as many emails that we have received. I have answered some of those emails, and I believe Commissioner Messer has done so as well. And anyways, this proposed ordinance has been reviewed by our prosecuting attorney, and I believe it's ready for your consideration. Tim.
Thank you. Before I turn to Tim, I just want to remind everybody, this is an action item for next week, for September 29th, 2020. And I'll turn to Tim. Do you have anything to add, Tim, before we ask questions?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Edwards?
Just one thing, Tim, have you had any more input from residents of the senior parks that are affected by this action?
I have not specifically had any more input from senior citizens or residents of the mobile home parks. Paula Cracknell is also aboard, so I'm not sure if she has or not.
And I guess my other piece of that is, would you know if these individuals that pay rent on it, there's about 100 properties, I think, affected on this senior park activity. Can that rent be raised under the governor's edict that we can't evict or can't raise rent? Do you know if that's going to be affected at all by this activity, if landlords that own these properties are raising rent or intend to raise rent? Do you know any of the issues around that?
No, I'm sorry. I don't have an answer regarding that.
Commissioner, the governor's order relates to evictions, not necessarily in preventing a landlord for raising rents.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Minister?
Yeah, I would just say that I've gone meticulously through the questions raised by the various citizens I've heard from. Meetings with the prosecuting attorney about the formation of the district, meetings with the Department of Ecology about the powers of the district, meetings with financial staff about what what financial liability might lay on the county by authorizing the assessment, meetings with various members of our staff, including Paula Cracknell, who's on here, who gave me some great information about alum treatments and how they can be used poorly and well, and when they need to be used and whether they're safe. So I've gone through all the questions that I had, and I'm ready to have this item move forward.
Okay.
I can get more into that. And I guess I would say that to citizens, I've compiled all that information in a memo, which I sent to citizens that contacted me. If there are other citizens that have questions about what information I've gotten and what my position is based on, I'm happy to send that letter to any other citizen. Just contact my office and I can give you all the background. I put a lot of time into this issue to make sure we're on track.
Thank you. Thank you for your diligence on that as well. And there's nothing more on that one, then we're going to move on. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 6 is the budget amendment 5, appropriating additional COVID funding.
Yeah, I will let Robin take on this item, but I believe we may have an additional item next week for your consideration related to the budget as well. But go ahead, Robin.
Good morning, commissioners. This item on your agenda is an additional appropriation for the new COVID allocation from the state. It adds the money for both public health and the more flexible money coming from the state. We are also making an error correction in the last appropriation of COVID money. It went to the wrong department, so it's a net zero change. And the last item being addressed on this amendment is an increase for TCOM revenue because of the passage of their tax increase. So this is an opportune time to add that. Those are the 3 items being addressed on this amendment. It's very straightforward, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about it.
All right, Commissioner Mincer, anything for Robin?
Nope, tracking this one.
Commissioner Edwards?
No, not at this time.
My only question is, Robin, repeat that for me. You said the increase in TCOM revenue due to the sales tax?
Right. There was measure that was passed, increasing the tax collected for TCOM 911. And that needs to be appropriated so that the county can pass the money through.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure. The other two budget-related items that you'll see next week, one is your fiscal policies. That's over in legal, and I think I have feedback from Elizabeth, and I'll get that to you as soon as she gives it the okay. And the other item is the repeal of the biennium budget resolution so that we're back on an annual basis.
Oh, okay, so that'll come to us next week then.
Yep.
Okay. Gentlemen, any questions of Robin regarding that?
Yes, I have one.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Have we had any more information come back about sales tax revenue?
No, I have not seen the new numbers yet. I expect them either very late this week or much more likely early next week.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Robin. And then that's going to wrap up that board meeting. And we are, I'm looking at the clock as well. Let's knock a couple more of these out before we take a break. Proclamations and awards. We covered some of those.
Yes. Good morning, commissioners. This is Katie Johnson filling in for Amy Davis, clerk of the board. I am in possession of the National Voters Registration Day, which you'll find on your agendas for today, the 22nd. We also have a proclamation for next week, which Romero discussed, the Thurston County Flood Awareness Week. You'll find that in the 29th agenda for approval. So if you have any questions for that, please feel free to let us know and we'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, we covered those a little bit earlier and we'll get a hold of you, Katie, if need be. Advisory boards and commissions?
No advisory boards and commissions at this time.
All right, thanks, Katie.
Thank you.
PIO check-in. Is it going to be Brian?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good morning, Commissioners. Brian Dominique, Public Information Officer for the board. Just a few quick updates this morning. The draft Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan is open for public comments until Friday, October 16th, and I'm working with TRPC to share information about the plan and how people can provide comments, learn more, and participate. And there's still time to respond to the 2020 census. People can respond through September 30th, so about 9 days left. Anyone who hasn't responded can go to my2020census.gov, and it takes about 10 minutes, 10 questions. And then one of the final operations of the 2020 census is actually happening today through the 24th. It's going to be the homeless count. Specially trained census workers are going to be going out and counting people at shelters, soup kitchens, and mobile van stops, as well as people who are living outside. So that's taking place September 22nd through September 24th. And then finally, a quick update on social media and our online activities. On YouTube, we have 478 subscribers. Facebook, 10,823 followers. Twitter, we have 6,606 followers. And our county news page, which is how we distribute the Friday Five, has 526 subscribers. And we average about 20 new subscribers each month. Our goal in launching the Friday Five was 500, so we're pretty excited that we've beat that goal. So, pending any questions, is all I have.
Well, I've got one quick question, and that is, have you done this internal survey yet on the insider?
Not yet. We're actually going to hold off on doing the internal survey until January.
Okay. Now I will stop asking. Commissioner Edwards, anything for Brian?
I guess the only thing I'd ask him, is there anything new on the TCTV activities that might be coming up? We talked about it several months ago.
So We have the Thurston County update, which is open to any commissioner. That's an opportunity. If you have something you want to talk about, you can talk to staff about it, film it. It's about a 10-minute program. I'm also working with emergency management, the City of Olympia, and I believe the City of Lacey on some stuff related to Flood Awareness Week and the Great Shakeout. I'll be meeting with them hopefully sometime next week to flesh out what those concepts are, but we should be seeing those in October.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mentor, anything for Brian?
No.
All right, Brian, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, commissioners.
Romero, legislative update, anything going on?
Yeah, last night, I participated on the kickoff meeting of the shared legislative agenda. The shared legislative agenda is a coordination between the cities of Olympia, Lacey, Tumwater, and Yale. Also, the Thurston County Chambers and the EDC, the Economic Development Council, along with the Thurston Regional Planning Council, TRPC. And we had a good conversation. We'll start forming what will be the legislative agenda from the regional perspective. There are quite a few ideas thrown on the table. I'm not going to walk you through some of those because we need to vet those. I did include, at least from the county's point of view, to continue making an argument on the court impact fees. That has been an effort in making sure that that is not sacrificed during the potential budget cuts the legislature may consider next year. Also, I included that perhaps we need to make sure that we lobby to restore the funding to the Department of Commerce to provide grants to the CPACER program. That is going to be part of the conversation as well. And among many other items they submitted each jurisdiction. As soon as we have a concise list of legislative items, I will share that with the board. Also tomorrow, I have a work session with Deborah Manguia, where we're going to start narrowing down what will be the county's legislative agenda. And as soon as we come down with a proposal for you, I will bring that for your consideration.
Very good. Commissioner Mentor, anything regarding that?
Ramiro, can you remind me on the court impact fees? I know the first year we just got a one-time payment, and then last year we were fighting to get the language, the way the budget is worded, so that it kind of stays. I mean, obviously it can always be chopped, but we were trying to get it, whatever it is, the budget wording, so that it kind of stays as an ongoing item.
Yeah, that was what we achieved, is to have.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, okay. And that's what we want to make sure they don't take that as an opportunity to take it off, because we lobby in a way to make sure that it's part of their base budget.
Right. Thank you.
Commissioner Edwards?
No, sir.
Nothing on the legislative? Okay. That's it then. Thank you for that. And let's hit the briefing for the public hearing decision pending.
Do you want to take a break before then? I think that's going to take a little time.
Would that be a conversation? Let's take a break then. I have 10:05 hours. Let's take a 15-minute break. We'll be back at 10:20. Thank you. We're in recess. Welcome back to the Board of County Commissioners agenda setting and work session for September 22nd, 2020. We're moving on with the agenda. Next on the list is our 2020 Conservation Futures proposals. This follow up on a briefing from September 16th. Go ahead, Ramiro.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioners. This is related to the 2020 applications related to the conservation futures, just for the public benefit. For the last couple of years, I believe 2018, the Board of County Commissioners stopped having conservation future grants with the attempt that we can probably build some capital as a result of this funding to address the needs of purchasing land associated with habitat conservation plan. In September 2019, during a planning session, the board decided to open up the Conservation Futures Grant for 2020 with an amount of $500,000. That's just about half of what we get in revenues every year from the Conservation Futures, which is just about 0.04 cents per $1,000 per $1,000 valuation. That was in 2019. Staff conducted received the applications. They went through the review, and they received 6 applications. Before I go through the 6 applications, last week during the briefing, Commissioner Menser asked a question about the criteria used for selecting those applications for your consideration. And also, as a result of that conversation, the board provided direction that staff needs to come back later this year and have a board briefing related to the criteria specifically as to how perhaps the 2021 Conservation Future Grant Program should be developed. So that is something that I'll be working with the staff to make sure that is the case. So going back to the 2020, in your packet, there is a table of 6 projects. Based on the $500,000 threshold, staff suggested that perhaps you may consider funding the top 3, which is the James Family Farm, the Lower Henderson Inlet, and the Lower Elk Inlet. You also provided some perspective. You hear some perspective from Robin Campbell, myself. There's a very healthy ended fund balance on the Conservation Futures Fund. The board really has latitude as to how you may want to fund those projects as you see in this proposal. The overall amount of the 6 applications is $1,336,775. The conversation narrowed down related to the James Family Farm as a number 1. And I believe Commissioner Menser suggested another option to perhaps going down below the number 3 to start looking at other projects as you see fit. The James Family Farm was related to giving the staff to reach out to those property owners to see if there's an opportunity if this particular application can be used for the county to access any potential credits associated with the Habitat Conservation Plan. That is a question that perhaps the staff is ready to answer today. As a result of that, of today's conversation, I will ask the board to provide direction as to what projects, what applications you would like to fund for the 2020 Conservation Futures Grant Program. So maybe Chris Chapeau was going to take the question on the James Family Farm. Do you want to start with that?
Let's start with that. Commissioner Edwards, you have questions regarding that one, the James Family Farm?
Not particularly. I mean, it ends up giving us some prairie habitat. Is that right?
Yeah, if I could, Commissioners, this is Jennifer Davis, Community Planning Manager, and I think some of the discussion last week, I think, led me to think there was some clarity that needed to be lent to the relationship between sort of the normal conservation futures funding priorities and the HCP. So as you recall, the board gave direction last fall as well to not only do a kind of normal round of conservation futures funding, which we proceeded with, but to reserve back half of the annual funds, about $500,000 a year moving forward, for the HCP and for specifically for lands that are going to be useful as a mitigation properties under the HCP. And so we moved forward with that direction through our HCP financing plan and the budget. And we've been reserving those funds, and staff has been working hard to create a strategic plan basically to identify properties under the HCP that we could secure through easement or purchase so that we are ready once the HCP is approved and fully implemented to provide mitigation value from those properties. So that's that 500,000. The other 500,000 really was available for properties meeting a whole bunch of different criteria under ranking priorities, including endangered and threatened species. And James Family Farm ranked highest. It has multiple conservation values. It does have some gopher habitat, but the staff took a second look, and it's really only about 4.5 acres of occupied gopher soils out of 29 acres. This property isn't adjacent to any other kind of critical gopher reserve properties that we've identified as high priority. And it's not within an identified reserve priority area under our HCP. So if we were to pursue it as an HCP property and kind of put it through that lens, it would probably rank pretty low as an HCP mitigation property. Staff also reached out to the applicant last week, and we verified, one, that the county's the only funding they are seeking to preserve this property. And also the applicants aren't interested in pursuing an HCP easement. They didn't originally identify this parcel for preservation because of its pocket gopher occupancy. It's really an opportunity to conserve agricultural land, similar to kind of what we do every year with some of our conservation futures funding and securing agricultural properties and farmland so that they do not get converted to development. So that's sort of the James Family Farm and the bigger context of HCP funding. We still have plenty of funding in the program to go after priority targeted HCP high habitat value properties. The James Family Farm isn't one of those, but it does have other high values for habitat and as ag land that makes it come out as our #1 ranking per the ranking committee this year. So with that, I guess questions on that.
You're basically saying that there's not going to be a big prairie benefit, I guess, or gopher benefit, but it's going to
Commissioner Edwards.
The rating.
Commissioner Edwards, do you have a microphone?
It's too quiet. Huh?
Yep.
I don't get blamed for being too quiet very often.
Thank you.
So that rating is still going to stay up there, and multiple benefits. So nothing is going to change in that regard from the committee that made the recommendation. Is that right?
That's correct.
And I guess my next question is kind of for Robin, and it falls into all 6 of them, I guess, more than anything else. It sounded like the other day when you gave us a briefing on how much money we had left, we really did have adequate money. If we wanted to do all of these, you've got adequate money there. Is that right?
You're going to have an ending fund balance this year close to, if not more than, $8 million. You have adequate funding in this fund.
I guess what I'm wondering about, we've went over all these. We kind of all agreed that they're all important for different reasons, even all the way down to number 6. There's quite a bit of land that's going to be maintained, and we're going to have probably the ability for prairie habitat and for salmon recovery on that one. So I'm just kind of wondering why we just don't bite the bullet and try to do the whole thing and find out what kind of an impact that would have on what's left, what Robin is referring to. Because the HCP, when we first put this hold, if you will, on a portion of the Conservation Futures money, it was with thinking that we were gonna, I think, have an HCP in place earlier. And it looks like we're still, gosh, I don't know. I mean, we're gonna be lucky if we get this done in the next 2 years. In all reality, by the time it goes back to the Federal Register and comments and the whole thing. And if we've got adequate money, we'll have additional money coming in. It seemed like all of these were pretty beneficial programs. I know on the Nelson Ranch, it's probably the most, I don't know, the most acreage possibly, but that's what we're trying to do, is maintain farmland, open space, critical habitat. I'm just wondering, I don't know how my seatmates feel about it, but after going over this, would it be something that we would just want to bite the bullet and try to make it all work?
Okay, so Commissioner Menzer, you have any questions or comments? Because I do.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I appreciate the sentiment of wanting to fund all the projects, but the HCP, the previous board spearheaded that money, and it's there, and it's designed to, the HCP is cheaper than kind of the worst case scenario, but it's not as, prices have risen and it's not as cheap as the board was shooting for, and we're kind of in the middle, and we don't want citizens to pay more than they need to pay for their, permit. And so I'm kind of reluctant to reverse what would essentially be reversing the previous board's directive to spearhead or save that money. My concern was that we have a statute that says salmon recovery is encouraged for Conservation Futures, but yet we've taken half the money and said it's going to go to prairie. So in my opinion, if you balance those two things together, the other half of the money, prairie has to go down the list and salmon has to go up the list in order to make our program overall balanced and in line with the purposes of the statute. So, or that encouragement that's written right into the statute. So my only concern was that our criteria didn't do that. It basically said, okay, we're going to give half the money to prairie, and then prairie's going to compete on equal footing for the rest of the money too. And that's not, I don't think that's a balanced approach. So that's something we can talk about for next year, and that's fine. As far as this ranking priority, I'd certainly be willing to talk about funding the first 4, because the 4th one that's going to get squeezed out did have salmon benefits. So I think it kind of addresses my concern about how, we didn't maybe do it the way I would have liked to have done it this year. So I might be willing to do that. I don't think I'm willing to say just fund the whole list, because then we're eating up another $675,000 of money that the board had saved for mitigation. And I just, until that HCP lands squarely and firmly, and we know what it costs and we know what we've got to do, I don't want to go backwards on hard decisions, frankly, that the previous board made. And I was not entirely critical. I was quizzical about those decisions, but you made them and they had a reason. And I think at this point we should stick with them.
Thank you. Number one, I'm not asking you to do this, but the rundown you just gave us on the mitigation factors and such on the James family, did you do that for 1 through 6 or 1 through 3, Jennifer?
The same criteria were applied, a ranking criteria, which includes points for different types of habitat, includes a separate bucket of points if it's farm agricultural land. So the same criteria applied to all of these applications.
Okay. I thought I was getting something a little more in depth just now with your narration than we got last time.
If you would like to go back and review any of those properties in depth, Andy's here and can do that for you.
I appreciate that, but I'm not looking for that, no. But thank you. I looked at, one of the things I had written down was, for number 4, the Wilcox Ranch is what, or Reach rather, is what Commissioner Menzer just mentioned. I was asking how much of that was salmon versus prairie, and it sounds like it's salmon, which is very, very good. And the last one, number 6, the Nelson Ranch, I think Commissioner Edwards is right. I think that's the largest parcel of all of them, but it also received the lowest score. And it was reached, I mean, by several points too. And I had questions about that last time, and I'm not considering it now, so I don't need these answers, but I was wondering how big of an acreage that was, how many properties or buildings and homes were on that property. Would they be part of that or not, and such. But I'm not asking anybody to dig up or present that information, because if we were to decide right now, and we're not deciding right this second, I'm okay with number 1 through 4 right up the bat. I'm ready to do that. But the bottom 2, I'm not. Commissioner Edwards, I'll circle back to you. Anything?
Well, I guess I would just recognizing what, because I was involved in that earlier decision that Commissioner Menzer is talking about. But the time delay that we've experienced has affected our ending fund balance, I guess, in that fund. And based on what Robin presented last time we talked about this, I mean, I just thought we're trying to do what we can do, not only for prairie, but for salmon habitat as well. And if we've got it, and we're going to have money coming in over the next couple of years, I think we're going to have a fair amount of funding by the time we get this HCP through. And so, I don't know, I mean, I would just ask Robin, what do you think we'll have left in 2 years? What'll be in there in 2 years? I know she's thinking about it.
Half a moment, and I can show you the answer to that. Conservation futures.
And while she's looking that up, I mean, eventually we're going to try and do as much of this as we possibly can. So we continue to keep postponing things. I know some of these issues fall through, and then the availability of those properties for acquisition to save them, it goes away. And then we end up, I don't know, you talk about houses or whatever, I mean, you end up with housing on it. And I thought that's what we were trying not to do any more than we had to. Well, at the same time, I mean, I'm pushing for adequate housing too, because we're never going to have affordable housing if we don't have adequate housing. So the two kind of conflict, but how much money are we going to have, Robin?
So what you see on your screen, and I'm trying to make it big enough for people to actually see it, is this 2.5 and $1 million, roughly $3.5 million, is what we had originally planned to spend this year. We are spending none of it. So there's $3.5 million. Even if we had spent all of that, we would have had an ending fund balance of 4.7 million. So you're going to have close to 8 at the end of this year. Then in future years, we had planned, this is the plan, to spend $1,250,000 a year. That's less than your revenue, so I expect you'll adjust that. But again, that doesn't even spend down, so you would have a slightly growing fund balance. Given other things we paid for out of this fund, it's holding pretty steady. So if you spent 1.3 million this year, in 2 years, according to your plan, you would still have over $6 million in this fund.
And that's if we if we went ahead on all 6 of these items. Is that right?
Did them all, yes.
And for me, it's not the bottom line. It's the properties and the study going into them, and more work needing to be done to satisfy me. Commissioner Mentor, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I understand and my seatmates understand what this money means to have it. So Jennifer or Chris, I'm looking at you guys on the HCP, the financing plan that's built into it. Part of we have to come up with a certain number of dollars a year, and some of that money is coming from a fee that we're going to charge developers or property owners that want to do projects on go. And there's that matrix, and it depends on the quality of the habitat and all that. And then some of that money is coming from this money that Thurston, at least the money that we've saved to this point, which could be $8 million or $6 million or whatever. And correct me if I'm wrong, but is the financing kind of, I mean, you know, when we were debating the submittal of the HCP, we were kind of asking for ballparks about what that would cost to a typical developer. I remember it would be like $2,000 to $12,000 or $4,000 to $8,000. I mean, we had different kind of ranges depending on just a typical project on a typical piece of land. And is that set? I mean, to what extent is that set in stone versus that's just kind of as the money that the county has to contribute grows or shrinks, we would be fine tuning those dials. Is my question kind of clear? Is it, if the county has more money, then we're potentially reducing the burden on the citizens down the road for how much they might have to pay for a housing project on Gopher soil. Is that right? Or is everything kind of locked in by what we put into our plan and that's not going to change?
So nothing is locked in. We do need to demonstrate that we have put together a financial plan that meets the plan total mitigation at the end of 30 years, but that end dollar amount is a guess. It's an educated guess, but it is a guess on our part. So the mitigation funding that comes from the citizens does decrease if the board just chooses to increase its contribution. In addition, we will be adjusting those mitigation fees as land costs and maintenance costs and stewardship costs change over the next 30 years, because we have to maintain and show that we have the funding to the end of our current requested 30-year permit period.
Was there an assumption built in terms of what the county's contribution would be? Was there an assumption that we would be using the $500,000 every year from Conservation Futures on an ongoing basis?
Yes, that is correct. That assumption has been built in.
All right.
Yeah.
Hutch,
Go ahead, Gary.
I guess I'd follow up on that by saying that I think that we have adequate resources to do what we need to do now while the price of property is less, if you will. I guess I'd refer back to what the county started back in the 90s, and we've got that Nisqually Valley that we were able to buy the development rights. And because of that, we've continued to have, farm ground available. And we sat in on a meeting from the Ag Committee late last week, I think it was, in which that was a priority that they were shooting for, was to set aside some of these properties. And I can only tell you that at the time we set that money aside, thinking it was going to go towards the HCP, at least I thought it was going to happen faster than it did. Now it doesn't look like it's going to happen for a couple more years. And we're going to have adequate money to do this. That's why I want to do it now rather than let the price of properties continue to go up, up, and up. And we've got an opportunity here to cover both prairie and salmon habitat on these, so
Okay.
that's kind of where I'm at.
Well, like I said a few minutes ago, I'm open to 1, 2, 3, and 4 right now, but I'm not the least bit interested in West Bay or the Nelson Ranch. Let's see where where do you, Commissioner Menzer, where are you on this?
I think I'm in agreement, 1 through 4.
Okay. Then let's just go ahead and put this to rest. Thank you. What else do we need, Romero, to move forward?
No, just to summarize your conversation, commissioners, the majority of the board has decided to award the James Family Farm for $132,300, the Lower Henderson Inlet for $300,000, the Lower Eld Inlet for $75,000, and the Wilcox Ranch for $155,375 for a total of $662,675. So staff will work on the award letters and will circulate for your signature shortly.
All right, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, staff.
Thanks very much.
Thank you all very much. Okay, that takes us to commissioner items, and the first one up is policy on the county manager's role.
Yeah, you have an attachment that is printed backwards. So it begins with the ICMA Code of Ethics. So I will ask you to start from the back page, if you don't mind.
The resolution?
So that's a resolution for your consideration. And the next page is Exhibit A, which is the policy for on the county manager's role. I believe you had the opportunity to look at a draft of this, but let me walk you through, and this is mainly to the benefit of the public. The objective of this policy is to ensure the efficient and effective delivery of county services by outlining the roles of the county manager in relation with the Board of County Commissioners. This policy acknowledges elected offices in the county are not the subject of this document. The Board of County Commissioners is the appointing authority of the county manager. The county manager respects the responsibilities of the county commissioners and acknowledges that the final responsibility and authority for establishing the direction of the county is held by the Board of County Commissioners. The interaction between the county commissioners and the county managers recognizes the fact that the county manager is the chief executive officer of the county. All dealings with the county manager, whether in public and private, should respect the authority of the county manager in administrative matters. The county manager, in consultation with the commissioners, is the appointing authority of the assistant county managers and department directors. The commissioners are encouraged to work directly with the county manager when dealing with services and or issues involving the departments reporting to the county manager. Ethical responsibilities of the county manager. The county manager is a member of the International City County Management Association, ICMA, and is subject to the ICMA Professional Code of Ethics, which that is the attachment for you. The code binds the county manager to certain practices that are designed to ensure actions are in support of the county's best interests. Violations of such principles can result in censure by the ICMA. Roles of county commissioners and staff. The Board of County Commissioners retain the authority to accept, reject, or amend staff recommendations on policy matters. Individual commissioners are not to intervene in staff decision-making, the development of staff recommendations, scheduling daily work, or executing department priorities. All commissioners with concerns affecting Thurston County should bring those concerns to the county manager. The commissioners recognize the primary function of staff as executing county policy, implementing adopted goals and priorities, addressing day-to-day issues and problems, and keeping the commissioners informed. Staff are obligated to take guidance and direction only from the county manager, assistant county manager, or assigned department director or manager. County staff will make every effort to respond in a timely and professional manner to all requests for information or assistance made by the individual commissioners through the county manager, assistant county manager, or appropriate department director via the commissioner's executive assistants. No individual commissioner shall request or direct the county manager, assistant county manager, or department director to initiate any action or prepare any report that is significant in nature or initiate any significant project or study without the consent of a majority of the Board of County Commissioners. The county manager, at his or her discretion, shall determine whether or not this matter is significant. Next page. Commissioners are not to direct the staff or become involved or attempt to influence personnel matters that are under the direction of the county manager. Access to information. The county manager is the information liaison between the commissioners and county staff. Requests for information from commissioners that require research or is solicited because of a citizen complaint or commissioner's concern will be directed to the county manager, assistant county manager, or appropriate department director via the commissioner's executive assistants. This will not preclude commissioners requesting for routine, readily available information, but ideally should be directed to the county manager or appropriate department director via the commissioner's assistants. The Board of County Commissioners will be informed of requests and the staff's response when a formal report is involved. Commissioners are not to request information from employees' personnel file without the knowledge of and written consent by the employee and the county manager. Each employee's personnel record will be kept confidential to a maximum extent permitted by law and will not be open for inspection other than the employee supervisor, the appointed authority or designee, and the human resources staff for only county business-related purposes. That is the proposed policy that I have for you. And the resolution that I drafted is for you to formally consider approving this policy. And I'm open for any questions, revisions. And if you like, I can probably bring this matter for your formal action next week during your normal board meeting.
All right, commissioners, any questions of Romero or comments?
Nope, looks good.
No, Commissioner Menzer?
No, I think that the councils that have more than three, like 5 or 7 or 9, tend to have these kind of policies. With only 3 commissioners, we kind of get away with sort of a loose structure, and it works for the most part, but I think it's probably good to have something like this. And I've made some suggestions, and there's been several iterations of this, and I think I'm comfortable with kind of where it's landed.
In looking at the ICMA guidelines of the Code of Ethics and applying them to this policy, and I've talked with the county manager about this draft policy in the resolution, and some iterations or changes have been made. And I'm very happy with it, and I'm ready for it to move on as well.
So if okay, then I will bring this as an agenda item for next week's Board of County Commissioners meeting for your final consideration.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next is the CDBG CV. I just like saying that, CDBG CV, additional allocation.
Yeah, the CDBG, that's the Community Development Grant Program. And without getting too much into the complicated aspects as to how the CDBG money is distributed on a normal basis, which is, if you have an interlocal agreement, every year we circulate between the cities of Lacey, Tumwater, and the South County, which the cities of South County represents on the decision as to how the money should be allocated to address the South County needs, and the county manager represents the Office of the County Commissioners in that process. This particular allocation is different. This allocation is related to the coronavirus emergency. As you may recall, early in the year, we had an initial allocation of just about $750 $50,000 or thereabouts, which at that time, the Board of County Commissioners decided to have a regional conversation as to how that money should be distributed. That happened with representatives from a couple of cities, and the result of that was a proposal that was brought to you, I believe, early in the year. It just happens when on September 11, when you had the planning session, when you were looking at the Coronavirus Release Fund, there's an allocation, which that's next on the agenda. We asked the question, is there any CDBG money, coronavirus CDBG money coming our way? And just that afternoon, Tom received a notice that perhaps an additional $982,000 will be allocated to the county related to the CDBG money. This is a little bit different than the regular CRF, the Coronavirus Relief Fund. This has a little more flexibility in terms of the time in which we can spend this money. So the conversation today for you is how you like to go about and distribute this money. A couple of options for you, and this is just my options, I'm sure Tom has others. Either go with the same approach as we have done in the past, engage the regional partners as to how this money should be distributed, or you may consider setting those aside to cover the cost of isolation and quarantine and testing in 2021. Because at this point, everything that you have allocated as part of the CRF, the Coronavirus Release Fund, ends on November 30th, 2020. But the need to respond to this emergency doesn't end at the end of November of this year. And that is probably what suggestions that we have. Tom, did I miss anything?
No, that's a good summary. I would add that one of the critical requirements for the CDBG funds is that a majority be used to support low and moderate income populations. So majority of the beneficiaries need to be 80% or below of area median income. So that does, depending on the type of activity selected, it does require us to collect income information from participants. So sometimes we just want to be careful in terms of the type of activity to ensure that we can meet that national objective and how we document that.
Right. So real quick, what was that amount, the additional amount, 900 some?
Yeah, the new amount is $982,247.
Thank you. And so with what you just added, Tom, if it has to be applied to the medium income, how would we document that for if we use that for a set aside for testing and or for IQ or INQ?
Right. So for example, for testing, there's something called area benefit. So if it was done in a low income community, we have several communities in our area that are designated as low and moderate income, such as Bucota, Yelm, Tenino area. So testing events that support that population would automatically qualify, but testing events that would happen in another part of the community that was not a low mod area, you would need to individually ask each person who was tested just to indicate their income. You don't need a lot of documentation, but you need to collect that. And then you need to assure that at least half of the people were below 80% or below in order for CDBG to be used to support that event.
Okay.
So with Q&I, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
With the isolation and quarantine, because that population, we have a little bit better feel. People who are experiencing homelessness are presumed to be low and moderate income, and there's a couple other presumed populations. So we would certainly need to do some documentation for the isolation and quarantine site, but because of the nature of the people who are using that site, it should be manageable and not a substantial burden in order to meet that documentation.
Okay. Commissioner Edwards, questions or comments?
No, I think they've covered just about everything.
Commissioner Menzer.
Yeah, I guess I had the same question about just how difficult that's going to be to allocate, the tester by, test recipient by test recipient, and then some of the money's going one way, and then we need money for the other group folks. I guess remind me, maybe this is for Ramiro, but the previous block, I think it was $717,000 of CDBG that was allocated by the regional partners committee. Where did that end up going?
Yeah, it would ended up to help food needs in the community, as well as isolation and quarantine needs. And then it was set aside for the administrative aspects of the county. And you heard from the staff that, go ahead, Tom.
I'll say, and there was also a portion set aside for testing,
Yeah.
specifically in the South County.
For also for testing, and also the administrative set aside, you heard from staff that if in fact that is not used or needed, that can be redirected to the 3 areas it was identified. So that's how it was allocated.
Well, I guess one logical way to look at the proposal that you're making is that we'd essentially be just increasing the allocations toward the same priorities that the regional group had come up with to begin with. I mean, they obviously put a priority on testing and quarantine and isolation, and so there's a logic to that, to get, okay, additional money's coming in. We still have need there for 2021 in particular. So, rather than pivoting to some other set of priorities that the commissioners came up with, basically staying on track with the priorities that the group came up with, I guess makes some sense to me. So.
Yeah, except for the food needs, the group identified, but also the food that, are addressed in a larger context through the United Way contributions.
Right.
So the need of the community are mitigated through other means as well, based on your previous decisions.
I get that. I'm just making the point that we would not be pivoting to some unrelated priority that was different than what we'd be staying within the confines of what the group had come up with on the previous round. So that makes me feel better about it, especially when the need is there.
Correct.
Because of the timing of all this.
Yeah, let me ask a quick question, Gary. Can this funding also be used? I know we've given funding out to Thurston Strong, to United Way, CAC, and such. And we've used the same approach, the set aside for testing and Q&I. Can some of this funding be used for the BHA, the Behavioral Health Administration, to pay for any of the costs of their personnel in jail, or anything that might be COVID related regarding the BHA?
I would need to look into that. I don't have an immediate answer for you. I'd need to kind of examine the CDBG rules a little more closely. One of the key rules with CDBG is there cannot be duplication of benefits, and you need to pay for, if it's a government service, it needs to be a new service or an expansion of service. So you cannot use it to replace existing government funding. So I don't know all the BHA funding sources and mechanisms well enough, but we could look into that.
And they're not a government organization; they're a quasi, and they have funding streams all over the place, like the county does. And I'm not privy. I don't understand every nuance to that either. But I know they've got some needs surrounding the coronavirus for the pandemic, and I just want to make sure that they don't get left out. And I know they can apply for funding, I would think, through the Thurston Strong. I don't know. I kind of suggested that to Mark Friedman yesterday, to check with Thurston Strong and see if there's any applicable grant money for them for those reasons as well. I just wanted to ask you that. Go ahead, Gary.
Tom, do you know, I know Dr. A is talking about putting out more guidance later this week on schools. And I don't know how much of that has to do with testing, but I know the schools are particularly worried about being able to open up and then safely open up. And we don't know what new testing mechanisms might become available, and I'll use schools as the example. I mean, it's a big piece of our community, and I'm wondering if they don't have adequate money for testing, is there any way some of this could be coordinated towards schools to make it available to them should the need arise to keep schools open and functioning through more testing? And has there ever been any talk about that, or is there any way to make that fit? Or are you in touch with the schools enough to know that they do have adequate revenue for testing should something like that develop?
I'll look to Shelley Slaughter to answer some of the questions around schools. I would say, once again, the same principles apply to the use of the CDBG money. We'd have to document that the students receiving testing, what their, either it would be in an area that was considered a low mod area, or we'd have to ask for documentation or some indication of the student's income level, their household's income level. But I'll let Shelley respond to the schools question.
Okay.
I agree with Tom that this funding could be utilized to support students that reside in those low to moderate income benefit areas through community-based testing strategies that sound like is a priority that you already have for this funding, or that you may decide to go forth with today. So in terms of schools themselves offering testing, that is not a role of the schools, but Public Health and Social Services is trying to increase and support more students and family access to testing throughout our community through the coronavirus relief funds, which is part of the next agenda item.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Gary, about the schools. That's really vitally important as well. Do you have anything? Yeah, go ahead. Wait, Gary, do you have anything else?
No, I'm good.
Okay, go ahead, Ty.
Oh, I just wanted Tom to have the information backing up what Hutch made a point about the behavioral health. I just have an email just sitting in right on my screen that says from the BHASO saying that during the second quarter of this year, which is basically the onset of the pandemic, the request for crisis services has increased 23%. And they've had about 2 FTEs worth of overtime per month, and they're struggling to get people hired to deal with this. So just in case you need that additional background for trying to assess whether there's an adequate connection, that's I think what we're both hearing from Mark and Joe about. Obviously it's coronavirus related.
Right.
Thank you for bringing that in. For bringing that up, Ty. I appreciate that. And if you had any information, if you need more information, let either Ty or myself know, or reach out to Joe Avalos or Mark Friedman.
Okay. Yeah, no, happy to do that. And yeah, it's just getting into how this funds specifically would be used. And yeah, just need a little bit more details, but I can help figure that out.
And I bet their clientele meet the median income, more or less. All right. So what more on this topic?
So, well, just to bring all
Same
that
approach?
conversation to the center. So what I hear is the additional 982,247 of CDBG CV money will be set aside to mainly address the needs of quarantine and isolation, as well as testing based on the criteria that Tom outlined. And also we're going to follow up with the request of the BHA, whether that may be uneligible activity, the CDBG CV could be covered.
And is that of the using the same approach or setting aside for Q&I and testing? Is that the recommendation of staff? Is the set aside for the testing and Q&I? Shelley, is that what you would prefer?
Yes, sir. That would be my recommendation as well.
Okay. All right. Anything else from my seatmates? No. Nope. Okay. Thank you, Romero. You got it. Next is the coronavirus relief funds update.
And so this is going to take a little time, and I'm here with Jenica, and also I believe Brandon, our internal editor, is here as part of the conversation.
Okay.
So let me begin by you have attached in your packet a letter from the EDC directly to you, extending their appreciation of the contributions and decisions you have made to support the needs of the business community in Thurston County. As a nice letter, I just want to make sure that you have that in front of you. Also, in the back, there is a letter from Mr. Kyle Crunk. He's the president and CEO of the South Sound YMCA. And this letter was submitted last week. In so many different words, he's requesting for the Board of County Commissioners to allocate county CRF funding to cover for unemployment insurance expenses for just about $510,000, and also for supplies related to PPEs for $43,000. Jenica and I had a brief conversation on this. She has been in touch with Mr. Cronk, and we got him through to make an application through the Thurston Strong, because that's the umbrella in which any nonprofit and any business can access the Corona Relief Fund allocated by the county. The county cannot, I believe at this point, entertain individual requests. They specifically addresses unemployment insurance, because that might be a very, very difficult item to deal with at the county's point of view. So I just want to make sure you got this letter in front of you, and also the steps that we have taken to address their concerns. And I believe they have approached Thurston Strong to see how they can get access through their process to some of the Corona Relief Fund, CRF funding.
Is that specifically one of the reasons why Brandon's on with us today?
No.
Okay. Well, it is a very nice letter from the EDC, from Michael Cade. It was very nice. And thank you for reaching out to the Y and letting Kyle know what's up. Commissioners, any questions or comments regarding this so far?
No, sir.
Okay. Go ahead, Nick Romero.
So the next conversation, so now I'm gonna take you back to September 11, 2020.
Yeah.
And you have a copy of a document called Additional COVID Relief Funds. This is an attempt to make sense of the doodling that I did on the whiteboard on that date, as you may remember. And so there, the conversation was, it was in two areas. The county received an additional $5.7 million from the CRF through Commerce. During that conversation, you made initial allocations, which you allocated an additional $4 million to Thurston Strong. You allocated an additional $1 million to United Way, to the same programs they have already implemented. And you have allocated the remaining $700,000 to the Community Action Council for rent assistance and eviction prevention. Then we move into the conversation of the additional $5.7 million that it was allocated directly to public health. When that conversation occurred, there was an opportunity to see if we can switch some of the previous allocations that were made out of the $6.4 million initially that you made a couple of months ago to meet the needs of public health, to see if we can bring those over to meet the requirements of the Department of Health. As a result, we made an assumption that we could have an additional $4.2 million out of that allocation. The result of that was that you allocated an additional $1.5 million to Thurston Strong, an additional $1 million to United Way, and an additional $700,000 to the Community Action Council. But it was an asterisk on that. And the asterisk was, we need to make sure that in fact we can swap those activities between these two funds. Just happened that after that conversation occurred, we received some information from the Department of Health, the State Department of Health, which is preventing us at this point to supplant that initial allocation. That put us in a interesting crossroads. We have raised this issue to the Washington State Association of Counties. To a certain extent, I understand the Department of Health having that restriction of no supplanting the $5.7 million in this case to meet the needs of public health. Because on the initial allocation of the Coronavirus Relief Fund, some jurisdictions did not do the due diligence as Thurston County did, and they did not allocate any money to the public health needs. So fast forward to this, that was the intent of the Department of Health to make sure the public health needs are addressed. But I believe, and we have raised the issue again to the Washington State Association of Counties, the counties such as Thurston County who did the right thing to allocate public health money at the beginning has been penalized of doing the right thing. So there is a move afoot. The WASAC is getting in conversations with the governor's office to see if there is any flexibility for Thurston County to have this money be allocated and still meeting the needs of public health as initially intended. So that's what has changed since the last conversation that we had on September 11th. I will stop there because there is more to it, to see if you have any questions, or perhaps Shelley and Robin can supplement any information that perhaps that I have missed.
Gary, you got anything to start with?
Not to start with, I'm still listening.
Okay, Ty?
Me too. Thanks.
Okay, me three. Here we go.
Robin, Shelley, any additional feedback on that?
No, I think you covered it very well. And we want to work with WASAC to get some of this walked back.
Yep. Yeah.
So the next step in the conversation that you had was three, if you may remember. One, you set aside $1 million of the coronavirus release fund, and the more flexible part, and you set aside $1 million to have a perspective from Dr. Abdelmalik if there's any needs that she sees from that perspective. So that conversation is coming and for you to have. Also, you ask staff to go and have a conversation with Brandon, our internal auditor, to see if the project from the assessor office is a qualified project for the assessor's office to use the coronavirus release fund. I believe their project is about $550,000, thereabouts. And so that is why Brandon is here. And the third leg of that stool is there was an indication that perhaps of the initial $15.7 million in some of the decisions that you made for internal needs, perhaps there is additional capacity out of that, and it's just about an additional $1 million. So in total, you have $2 million additional that perhaps you may consider including the perspective from Dr. Abdelmalik they will be providing to you this morning. So maybe where we can start this morning is having a perspective from Brandon related to the assessor's office project. Okay. And that was again the aerial photography proposed by the assessor. Jenica, Brandon, your show.
Ahead,
Thank you. Brandon, I'll let you move forward with your assessment and add anything if needed.
Great. Well, good morning, commissioners. Again, Brandon Weber, internal auditor for Thurston County. Thanks for an opportunity to provide a brief update on the assessor's office project before kind of get into some information about this project, just want to mention that Assessor Drew and several of his staff contributed to providing information so that we really can make the best decision around whether or not this is an eligible project for coronavirus relief funds. So thank you for them and being really available. And I believe if there's some specific or technical questions, there might be a couple of folks there in the audience that could provide some more clarification. Again, just as way of background, the assessor's office requested the use of coronavirus relief funding to purchase some enhanced imaging from Eagle View. And in the initial review of this application, the team had determined that in our judgment, based on the existing Treasury guidance, as well as just the evolving understanding around the public health emergency, that this was not eligible. And just one real quick thought on that. One of the things that the review team considered was indoors versus outdoors, and try to use our best judgment around, what was absolutely necessary. And so we focus most of our approvals on projects that involve physical distancing indoors. And I know you've been through all that extensive list that Jenica prepared and all those various projects. So just to give you a little bit more background as far as what the purpose of this project is to purchase some enhanced imagery. One of the unique aspects of Eagle View's technology is it uses oblique imagery, which shoots photography at a 45-degree angle. And this really allows assessor's office staff to take measurements simply with the click of a mouse instead of being on site. According to my conversations with them, approximately 20,000 properties require an in-person inspection each year. This new technology, if implemented, is expected to reduce that amount to approximately 3,000 properties a year, or approximately about a 7-fold decrease in interactions with property owners. And as we get to the business case as presented by the assessor's office, I'm going to probably repeat some things that you've heard many times throughout some of these CRF discussions. But as you recall, the CARES Act only allows us to spend these funds on expenditures that are necessary incurred due to the public health emergency with respect to COVID-19. And Treasury provides some clarification on what it actually means to be necessary. And I'll just give you two thoughts as we frame this discussion. The requirements that the expenditures be incurred due to the public health emergency means that expenditures must be used for actions taken to respond to the public health emergency. So again, it's this idea of in response. So it needs to be a action taken based on what's needed for the public health emergency. The other aspect that they describe is around necessary. And the Department of Treasury understands this term broadly to mean that an expenditure is reasonably necessary for the intended use in the reasonable judgment of the government officials responsible for spending fund payments. It's kind of a mouthful there, but kind of to state this differently, Treasury has given officials broad authority in determining what reasonableness. And from an audit standpoint, the most important thing will be documentation of that judgment of the necessity, or presenting a clear business case for why an expenditure is needed in response to the COVID-19 public health emergency. Again, it's all about reasonableness and ensuring that we've got documentation. Through my discussions with Treasurer's office staff, there's two points that I think really need to be considered and really are the business case around this. And one is essentially reducing the interactions with the public related to the 6-foot physical distancing guidelines that we all know very well right now. And that's one thing that they're going to really prevent with this project. And then the second one really is the public perception around reducing property owners' anxiety or concerns about public interactions. So I'll elaborate on those 2 points real quickly. But as I'm sure you're aware, when our assessor's office staff are going out and doing inspections of properties, they announce themselves to property owners. They knock on the door, they introduce themselves, they let them know what's going on so that they're not wandering around people's property without making their awareness known. Assessor's office staff are wearing face coverings, they're provided gloves. They themselves are ensuring that they're meeting that 6-foot physical distancing guidelines. However, one of the challenges is property owners may not always maintain that 6-foot distance. My understanding is that at times property owners may want to be overzealous in talking to the staff that are out there. In some cases, they may not appreciate assessor's office staff there. So the idea is that if we reduce the amount of in-person interactions from potentially as many as 20,000 to 3,000, we would reduce the risk of potential COVID-19 exposures. So that's the first point. The second point is really around being aware that property owners may be apprehensive about somebody physically being on site on their property. And my understanding is there's actually been phone calls that the assessor's office has received and some frustration about folks out there just trying to do their jobs. So those 2 points, as I understand it, are presented from the assessor's office as far as the business case. Ultimately, I believe that it's up to the Board of County Commissioners to agree or consent to that judgment. But from my perspective, I think we do have a pretty good case to say, hey, this is connected to the pandemic. So I'll give you, I know you're probably going to want to discuss this, but I want to kind of add a caveat here to this request. The original request was, and I don't have it right in front of me, but it was approximately $700,000. And that request included 5 years of prepayment of imagery. I know from some previous conversations that you've had, we've talked about long-term leases of property, things like that. And the Treasury guidance is pretty clear on this in that we can't do prepayments. We need to really follow our consistent process with contracting, which essentially tends to be pay as you go. So if we were to consider this project, my only recommendation would we would be looking at year one of the imagery, which don't quote me on this because they're approximate, but it's about $117,000 for the imagery and the flyover, plus an additional $20,000 for the proprietary software, I believe, to be able to view that imagery. So that 137,000 approximately would be, from my perspective, what would be potentially allowable. The other additional costs that are prepaid, I don't think that meets the intent of these funds and the idea that these costs are all incurred by November 30th. And then one other question that the review team looked at really closely with this is just the importance of ensuring that these costs are in fact incurred by the end of our commerce contract, which is now November 30th. And in speaking with assessor's office staff this morning, they were able to get in touch with their Eagle View representative, and they stated to me that they could do the flyover in October, which aims to capture the imagery, and they believe that a portion of the deliverables would be available by the end of November. And so again, this is an area of caution. My suggestion, if this is something that the board chooses to explore, that we get a little bit more clarity around whether or not those expenditures could be incurred by the end of November, and if they can't, understanding what portion of those expenditures could be incurred. Any questions, comments, any additional things that I can expand upon?
So just a quick question before can you elaborate on the timing, assuming that the vendor may be flying over in October and getting the application perhaps from their perspective ready before the end of November? Would that assumes that we already have a contract with them, and how the procurement process will be? A request for proposals, or this is a sole source?
Oh, great question, Romero. So several months ago, the assessor's office staff actually provided me the King County contract that they plan to piggyback off of. And in review of that contract, there's a provision in there that actually allows other jurisdictions, other governments to go ahead and purchase off of that, which that contract was awarded originally through a CRF. So that would actually allow us to purchase off of that contract. The one unknown that I do not know at this time, but it's a procedural aspect, is that under Washington state law, to use another jurisdiction's contract, we would have to enter into a interlocal agreement with King County to use their contracts. I'm not aware that we have that. That would be something that would require a little bit more explanation. But I've viewed those before, and they're very, 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 very basic. So that would be one aspect that we would need to ensure. But from a contracting standpoint, we wouldn't need to go out to RFP. And I know legal has also reviewed that contract and has the same conclusions as I did.
Thank you.
Hutch, I've got a question.
Go ahead, Gary.
So Brandon, you've you've adjusted your thinking on this, whether it'd be eligible or not, I take it, from a week or so ago when we talked about it. Is that right?
Yeah,
you're kind of there now.
Yeah, I think so. And I guess from my perspective, all these projects are not created equal, and their value in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. In some cases, there may be some things that are more valuable and things that are less valuable. But at the end of the day, I believe that this does provide value in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So yes.
And then if last week's information you based it on, you do believe it's more valuable, and now in today's environment, it seems like 6 feet is not enough, and that the vapor from face masks and such is more of a problem than maybe it was a week ago, or at least we're getting that information through our health people. So, and overall safety, I mean, everything we're doing here when we're helping employees stay safe by purchasing equipment to help them work remotely and that type of thing. I mean, it continued to go on. I mean, it could be a benefit later on, but it's definitely, we're doing it because of this virus. So if you were thinking maybe this is okay based on last week, are you thinking if you based it on what new information we're getting this week, we're even in a stronger position possibly?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Certainly, the evolving knowledge and research and science around COVID-19 is not my area of expertise, and I'm listening to it as a layman. I know you guys are certainly more of an expert in this area, but yeah, I think that's the filter in which we need to review these decisions and what's our reasonable and necessary response to COVID-19.
Okay, thank you very much.
There's still a lot of caveats attached to it, but go ahead, Ty.
I just want to make sure I get the numbers right. So, because you said I remembered 732,000, and then Ramiro did something about 550,000, and then you're saying are you saying that only $137,000 of this total cost is coverable? And then out of the 700 plus, I think I remembered 732, but whatever it was, 700 and something $1,000. So then there's another 600,000 or 575 that is not covered.
So, Ty, the best I can do to answer your question is that 700,000 was comprised of a 6-year contract, and it included multiple rounds of flyovers. A small amount of that included prepayments for assessors' office staff to travel to the vendor to be able to get training on the software so that they could use that in the most effective way. So stated differently, it had many prepaids into that, and Treasury doesn't allow us to prepay, for multiple years related to contracts. It really needs to be things that have incurred, that have been delivered, and a good example is the courthouse. The other site for the courthouse, that's one of the things that we possibly explored was the ability to pay more of that up front. And again, Treasury guidance is pretty specific, and they don't want us prepaying for stuff.
You're talking about the courtrooms?
Yeah, that's correct.
Courtrooms, okay. Go ahead, Ty.
So if it's a 6-year contract, but we're only going to get CARES funding for 1 year, then it's basically a sixth of the cost, maybe with a few caveats for the startup software and whatnot. But well, that's a big difference. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't have the business case that you've described. Like, maybe I'd had more conversations with the assessor. Like, I feel pretty comfortable about it. And Commissioner Edwards' points are good points about we have evolving knowledge. So I'm pretty comfortable about that. It's just the fact that it's actually only going to cover, a sixth of what we might hope it would cover. And then that's another commitment that the board's then taking on. That's where I have to think about that a little more carefully.
Yeah, and that is
And the timing.
Yeah, that is a good point, Commissioner. Although whatever 150,000 cover or thereabouts, the obligation, it will be on the general fund in the long term, and that's something the board may consider as we're going through. So I'd like to stand corrected on the number that I give you, the total cost of the project. Brandon has the latest number, so the number that I gave you is incorrect. My memory is failing. I'm getting older.
Hey, Hutch, could I jump in there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Following up on that. It makes sense to me that if we can use the CARES money initially to get us the equipment and everything that we need, or whatever it's going to take to do that, and then over a 6-year period, we're going to have to come up with the rest of that funding. But the efficiency that was pointed out on doing the job seems to be well worth it. And we're going to get out of this COVID thing at some point, but I mean, just the safety of the assessors folks out there interacting in sometimes unsafe conditions, I think could be worth the expenditure.
And one of the things I was hanging my hat on was what Ramiro was talking about is the RFP and an ILA or MOU with King County and such, and the timing of all this happening in a timely enough fashion with zero delays just has me kind of concerned. Because here we are almost the end of September.
Could I, Mr. Chair, I think the assessor called in and is muted. He texted me that he wanted to throw in an additional point.
Yeah, he's open. Stephen, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe put the microphone there.
And I just wanted to point out when we look at the out years, just as in our budget submission for this year, because we submitted this as a general fund ask, the first year cost is not entirely an unbudgeted cost for the county. That is, the county was already going to fly countywide for its level of pictometry next year, its level of imagery next year. And so the cost of signing the contract for next year, if it were a general fund cost, is somewhere in the order of well, it's the net difference. I think it's less than if the total cost is $250,000, the net additional cost for this improvement is somewhere around $100,000. And similarly, in each of the out year flights, they will replace the flight that the county would otherwise do. And so when you're thinking about the out year cost that the contract commits you to, it's not, the gross number is not the new cost because we were going to fly every third year anyway. And this will be a slightly more expensive flight each time we fly. So that's my point. Thank you for hearing me.
Yeah. Okay. Anything additional, Gary?
No, I think it makes sense to me.
Okay. Ty?
I'm good. That was a good point. Appreciate that.
And that addressed my concern too, the out years. All right, so where are we now, Romero?
That's what I'm asking the board. So maybe a suggestion, because there is a couple of steps that we need to take, that is going to take some time. That's what I asked Brandon, the procurement process. I'm glad to hear that probably we can piggyback on the King County contract, but we need to have an interlocal agreement. And in the interlocal agreement, I'm sorry.
We do have one.
With King County?
Yes, we do. We sent it to legal. It's the first time we've been run for this. We sent it to the legal department for review.
But the board has not approved the interlocal agreement.
Who's talking?
Mike Brooks.
Oh, okay.
So remind me, but the board has not approved the interlocal agreement. Stephen, do you know that? He left.
Got it.
I'm not aware of whether there is a board approved interlocal with King County.
Yeah, so that's probably the next step that we need to take. So that is going to take at least a couple of weeks. So I'm just looking from the logistics in terms of the timing and the deadlines that we have. But yeah, Robin, I think.
Go ahead. That was my concern.
Say that having an interlocal agreement for contract piggybacking is really simple and straightforward and can be done very quickly.
Okay.
We have them with other counties. They're very simple.
Yeah, I didn't keen on the complexity. I'm keen on the timing.
Yeah.
Right, but it really could be put in place.
Right.
Very, very.
Okay.
Well, Hutch, can I?
So what's what's the next step? Hang on, Gary. What's the next step?
So what I'm hearing is the board is looking to allocate $150,000 from the Corona Relief Fund, and you're asking the assessor's office to process an interlocal agreement and try to execute this contract as soon as possible. Also, what I understand, the board is committing to fund the additional expenses in the years to come out of the general fund. And I'm just going to make that clear, just to make sure the board is okay with that direction.
Hutch?
Go ahead, Gary.
Well, using that statement, I guess, I look towards efficiencies in those future years. I know it's going to cost us money, but I want to get efficient every time we can get efficient. And it looks like that is an efficiency move as much as anything that will save us money in the long run anyway. So we've got an opportunity to do it. And that's kind of why I'm pushing to do it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, Commissioner, but with all the efficiencies in place, the board needs to take an action in getting money out of the general fund to cover this, because efficiencies alone will not cover the 600,000 or whatever that is.
Well, it's going to be over a 5-year period.
I'm just putting the parameters in place for you to make sure that you make those decisions based on the best available information for you.
I think we're going to
not influencing any decisions that you need to make.
I think sales tax is going to be okay. Property tax is going to be okay. REIT funding, I think, is going to continue to come up because we're going to have building, and I don't know where it all can come from, but I think it's worth the investment myself.
Can I see from Brandon another chin shake that this will pass an audit?
Yes, I don't have any concerns. Again, it's really documenting that. I do agree with Ramiro, and there's some procedural timelines that we need to watch closely. My suggestion, again, and I'll repeat the information I received hot off the press from the assessor's office folks this morning is there is some cautiousness about whether this project can be delivered by the end of November, which is our current deadline from Commerce. So I think we need to watch it closely, and as you all are doing with other projects, should it not happen, we need to be careful about moving forward if we don't think it can get done.
So we have breathing room to back out if we have to, if we went in and approve it.
That'll be dependent upon the timing of the contract and possibly any language in there.
Okay. I know the contracts have that escape clause, but that would be vital. It's just really tight timing. Okay, what do you need from us now, Romero?
So no, so what I'm hearing is the board like to support the assessor's project, and perhaps is directing or asking the assessor's office to go ahead and proceed with bringing an interlocal agreement for the board to consider with the King County. And soon after that, start having a contract with the vendor, which that also has to come in front of the board for you to authorize. Then at that time, we'll see how the timing that Brandon is stating is working out in terms of the delivery. So I think there is a couple of checking points for the board to assess the timing of the delivery of this project, and that's what I understand on the next steps.
Well, that gives me comfort. Okay, good. But I support it. Anything else, commissioners? We have a couple more items on the agenda. Okay. Jenica, thank you very much for joining us, and Shelley.
No, is Jenica still part of the conversation?
Oh, you are, okay.
Sorry.
We do have one more item. As we consider to reconcile or continue to reconcile expenses, we believe the county may have surplus funds after meeting all identified and approved CRF requests. So there are a few factors still in motion that will determine if we have a surplus or not. But we have identified two priorities.
Has left the conference.
We have identified two priorities for potential support for if these funds are wish to be redirected in coordination with Thurston Strong. One is that if needed, increasing the ceiling for the child care grants. As we see the second round of grants coming out shortly, we'll have additional information on needs and gaps, but child care has been an area of high need. And then the second one is agricultural business support. And so I've been working with Stephen Bramwell, the director at WSU Extension, and he has helped provide information regarding impacts to farms. For example, locally, we've seen the Olympia Farmers Market has had huge declines in revenue due to less vendors and less operating days. The market is running at about 50 to 70%, depending on the month. He also mentioned that half of producers in Washington state anticipate losses of around 1/4 of their revenue. And so we're seeing locally that farmers are facing market closures and a loss of their customer base. And to support these agricultural businesses could be strategic investments to further systemic improvements. And so some examples of these systemic structural supports include cold storage infrastructure, food processing equipment, providing support to extend a food security box program. And so those are just examples, but those are the proposals in terms of where we could redirect support of those surplus funds.
Can I go with that? Not just the Olympia Farmers Market, but that would include the Rochester, Yelm, Tenino farmers markets as well?
He had given these more as examples of how we could work forward to make this equitable across the county. So I'm sure that would be part of the discussion.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Minister, anything?
Yes.
Go ahead, Gary.
Jenica, would this also help some of our, I don't know, we've got 3 or 4 destination farms in Thurston County that are suffering because they can't do the hayride, the pumpkin patch, or the different things that are required at their activities. They're also suffering. So is there a possibility that we could fit them in the mix somehow as well if we're doing an ag review?
I'm sure the EDC and Thurston Strong would be open to exploring how to best support the ag business locally. One change that they had added towards the second round of funding, the $4 million that the board had allocated, was there was the grant to support the Thurston restaurants, and they have opened up farmers to be eligible to those $5,000 grants.
Okay, thank you.
Very nice, good.
So, commissioners, let's go back to, you set aside $1 million. No, let me circle back on what Jenica just stated on the potential surplus. And you heard that perhaps the plan will be to whatever surplus. I think at this point of the $15.7 million, we can probably see a surplus about just about $1 million. If the board decides to move into Thurston Strong, it will be in 2 areas: raising the ceiling of the child care grants, as well as implementing an agricultural grant process to support the agricultural needs in the county. That's 2. The next conversation is you set aside $1 million on September 11, and you like to hear a perspective from Dr. Al-Malik, if there is, from her point of view, there is any needs that you would like to hear to allocate the $1 million. So it's 2 different pieces of conversation overall.
Hey, doctor, wasn't that smart of us to hold $1 million aside to see if you could use it?
Thank you. It's much appreciated. I have been very, very impressed listening to all of the earlier conversations today, and a lot of the things that I hold as a priority. I see that many of you also hold. In terms of things that I think that are going to be extremely important going forward, one of them is kind of behavioral health support. We're going to be going into winter. The pandemic is going to be with us for a significant period of time, and people will need additional support in terms of coping with its ramifications, specifically with the isolation and some of those and overall stress. We have already thought about kind of the testing piece, which is going to be essential, absolutely essential going forward, as well as the case investigation, contact tracing. All of those things have already been considered. Other things to consider are household supports for households that are having to quarantine. Especially for folks who might be living, paycheck to paycheck and, taking, 10, 14, in some cases, 24 days to keep our community safe and their families safe and the folks that they work with safe can be a huge, can be a very kind of onerous burden for them. So some of those supports that help people to do the right thing in terms of mitigating disease transmission. And this would also thinking about potential supply chain issues to help folks stay safe. So thinking about things like thinking about things like like hand sanitizer, the various things that people need for cleaning, all of those sorts of things that people will need continued access to going forward. Thinking also, when I look at our county, I'm always impressed by the diversity, both with people with different cultures, as well as we have so many people of different socioeconomic backgrounds as well. So thinking about some of our more vulnerable populations, and also setting aside money to reach out to communities that might not have the same access to information and support due to linguistic and other barriers would be something that I would strongly support prioritizing. Thinking, I agree with what was with the concern about the schools. I know that they will also need a lot of support going forward. Some of it with access to testing and figuring out the best way to do that, but some of it also potentially with the same types of material supports to make sure that that all of the masking and cleaning protocols can be well followed going into winter. One of my biggest concerns going forward has to do with how we as a community remain resilient, given that this is likely to be a longer term process than we had initially anticipated. How we as a community are inclusive of all of our members, with targeted interventions to each individual need. As well as looking forward to potential supply chain issues, which were a significant problem, particularly at the beginning of the pandemic, but may again become a problem should we see another spike in late fall, early winter.
Well, all good points, Doc. All good points. Yeah.
Could I follow up on one thing there that Dr.
Yeah, quickly, sure, quickly.
Very quickly. We're going to have probably exceptional issues that come up that are going to be directly related to this that are hard to pinpoint exactly which ones are. I mean, if you look at suicides are up by, a bunch. Domestic violence is up by a bunch. Some of that is probably directly related to the isolation and no job. And so are we going to be able to do something there with helping those jurisdictions out that handle that? That's all.
Okay. Romero?
Yeah, sorry I missed some points Dr. Abdelmalik made, but all good points. I think the question is whether the $1 million can be spent by the end of November. And that puts a very difficult caveat in all the activities they will need to do. It could be some expenditures related to what Dr. Abdelmalik stated, but some of the needs are going beyond the November 30th, 2020, which that may require additional conversation with the board as to how we may want to address Dr. A's points that she made today. But going back to the point of this conversation, the additional $1 million that you set aside for public health needs, perhaps, and this is just me, have already met. So there is potential of, and Shirley can chime in if I'm off on this one. So that puts an additional $1 million that you may consider directing to other needs.
It also begs the question, the very first thing Dr. A brought up, ma'am, was behavioral health. And so assessing the needs of maybe the Behavioral Health Administration, maybe that might give us a window of opportunity there to address those needs for those folks dealing with all these issues. let alone storms coming in and power going out, and maintaining mental health. Ty, did you have anything to add to the conversation? I didn't mean to exclude you.
No, I don't really have. I mean, I guess I had the same question. Dr. A said behavioral health support, and maybe she doesn't know either, but just kind of what does that mean in practice? Like I definitely want to address behavioral health support. That seems like a good priority, but I just don't know exactly, how we make that happen. This is a little overwhelming, frankly. This money and these deadlines and all these different needs, and hearing a lot of this information for the first time. And we just took in a bunch from Dr. A. We just took in a bunch from Jenica about new ideas from the EDC, and I'm going to pull Commissioner Edwards and say I feel rushed, and I know the clock's ticking, but I think I need to process some of these possibilities.
I'm sorry. I do as well. I was looking for more specifics. Hey, we need this amount of money for A, this amount of money for B, but you addressed all the needs, Doc, that do need addressed, and in some areas we are, and maybe some areas we could fund more. So, Romero, go ahead and wrap that up, would you please?
I think Shelley wanted to add some.
Shelley.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. I concur with Ramiro that at this point, public health has received adequate funding. And so the additional $1 million certainly, I think, could be put to excellent use in Thurston County to support our community. I wholeheartedly agree with all of Dr. Abdamalik's comments about the needs that we have that are in front of us, both now and in the future into 2021. We do need to make sure we're able to meet the funding deadlines. I do think that the behavioral health support is needed. We have also heard from TMBHA regarding the needs that they have been seeing. We have also been utilizing their services to help support those with behavioral health needs at our isolation and quarantine facility. I think that there could most definitely be some additional investments in behavioral health with the latest information that we have regarding suicide increases and other things that Commissioner Edwards brought up. But I also think that there are many great needs, as brought up by Jenica, that also will help support the overall health and well-being of our entire community by alleviating economic burdens by COVID-19.
All right, thank you.
So maybe to wrap this item, Commissioner. So what we'll do, I'll bring this item again next week, and I'll work with Jenica to bring you some specifics as to, in terms of dollar amounts related to the agricultural grant program through Thurston Strong, increasing the ceiling of the grants. They're geared towards child care. And we'll explore the option of the behavioral health support through the BHA. And maybe a conversation with Brandon will be a good point to see if that is an eligible item. So we'll bring those items to you again next week. And also we'll keep track of the Department of Health non-supplanting clause. And hopefully by next week, we should have a little more in concrete what that is. And if that has been resolved, then the plan that you have outlined is a go. If not, then we need to bring the board to another series of conversations as to what we need to do next.
All right,
And also as a result of this, you already outlined the assessor's project, so that's what I have for you in that item. Did I miss anything?
Go ahead, Ty.
I'm good with everything you just said, Ramiro. I would just like to add to Commissioner Edwards. I join with him in saying that any gaps related to the schools and the struggles there would be a high priority for me. So if we hear of those things, or we can get more, if there's any more information available that would identify such a gap, I'd be very, interested to hear that.
Beautiful. All right, so that ends that issue. The hiring exceptions.
Yeah, and those are the two positions that you have that relate to the assessor's office. And again, I don't want to say, let me take you back, but this is the plan the assessor's office had in terms of moving some of the positions around to meet the needs. So these are the other two positions for your consideration.
Discussion needed, or just want a thumbs up or down?
I just want to give direction from the board whether you like to lift the hiring freeze for those two positions in the assessor's office.
Gentlemen, you want to go ahead and tie and start?
This is, as I understand it, it's the tail end of a multi-pronged strategy that we've approved previously. So
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
correct. Yeah.
Gary?
Yeah, I'm ditto there with Commissioner Menser.
Well, all three thumbs up for both of those positions.
Okay, thank you. And that's all I have for you.
That's it.
Yeah.
All right, well, it's just after 12 noon, and we are adjourning this meeting, and see you at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Thank you.
Commissioners, you have a 145 photo op here at the room 280.
That's correct.
Bring your
That's
masks.
correct. Got it. Thank you.